Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the seventh webinar for local and regional governments towards COP25. My name is Yunus Arikan. I'm the Director of Global Policy at Global Advocacy at ICLEI Local Governments for Sustainability. Today, we will be running our webinar with the collaboration with our colleagues from Carlos de Freitas from FMDV, who joined us in the morning session. And in the afternoon session, we are very delighted to have Hamza Tiber and Sophie from the Executive Office of the UN Secretary General, who are part of the team who is leading the UN Climate Action Summit. It's a huge sacrifice. They have just landed from Abu Dhabi with a busy agenda, so we are grateful for their time and interest to join us. For those who are familiar with these webinars, we were having the advantage of my colleague Jisun Huang moderate these sessions and being the panelist. Jisun has completed her engagement with ICLEI, and she's now pursuing further careers. And we would like to thank her a lot for her support and contribution to our work. And we are confident that we will come across with her on this climate and advocacy space as soon as possible. And we look forward to continue meeting with new colleagues as well. So for today's agenda, we will very shortly go through the background of our 2019 priorities. We will spend some more time in SB50, some updates from resident cities, G20 and US climate mayors. And we will try to spend some time with Abu Dhabi climate meeting. As we mentioned, this will be delivered by Hamza Tiber. And then we'll conclude by the roadmap towards COP25, especially the IHLPF and the regional climate weeks. That is our agenda for today. Let's recall, it's a cyclic process. Annually, there is the president of the COP who is taking over from the COP that concluded in December or November, and then throughout the year they lead in terms of the implementation of the decisions, and the incoming presidencies are also preparing themselves with their priorities and expectations. And in between, every year in May and June, negotiators and stakeholders of the climate community meet in Bonn. This time we have the Polish presidency of the COP24 with Michel Kurtyka as the president and Tomasz Khrushchev as the special envoy. From the incoming presidency, Chilean government, we have Minister Schmidt, Minister of Environment, and Gonzalo Munoz as the high-level champion. Throughout 2019, we are building on our achievements of the Talanoa dialogues, where we mobilized in more than 60 sessions in 40 countries. The importance of that, it has created a huge atmosphere at many national governments. The advantage of working with local and regional governments, it improved our capacities to engage. And there is a COP decision which says that the parties should be encouraged to take the experience in revising their NDCs. That is the biggest achievement, because now we have a legal mandate or a legitimate call to connect from the Talanoas to the NDCs. This was exactly what we were asking for. As we said, this year's priority is, of course, to see more engagement in NDCs. Climate finance will be a hot topic. In September, there will be a standing committee on finance, focusing on sustainable cities. And whatever happens with the negotiations, we are committed to raise ambition, especially towards climate summit, but also in building up our engagement in the Paris Agreement. Climate neutrality is a goal that we pursue. We want to pursue before the end of before the mid-century, as the champion of the climate actions, that we should be demonstrating our leadership in this field. Meanwhile, we continue our engagement in the climate process through our showcase events, our consultations in the workshops, and also contribution to the decision-making process through interventions, but working with the Friends of Cities, which is now evolving into a new era. Since the beginning of the year, we are following a calendar that is our own agenda as LGMA, the UNFCCC negotiations, and other UN tracks. And as expected, June was one of those heavy periods, especially in addition to Bonn, there were outside events that took place. As a typical cycle, we are expecting July and August to be relatively less active in terms of public events, but I think many of our colleagues will be engaged in the preparation of the climate summit deliverables, but also preparing for the COP in terms of the documents to be concluded. Um, in that slide, I would like to highlight once again, since the European Parliament elections were on this Friday, the day before the day before the elections, there was a new call from the activists worldwide for a global climate strike on the 20th of September. We as ICLEI believe this is a very timely effort. We have seen how this public pressure has created influence in the elections in the European Parliament, at least. Obviously, climate summit is not an election, but standing up of all citizens and concerned stakeholders in a massive scale before the climate action summit obviously will support the ambitious actions that will be delivered in New York. Therefore, we would encourage our members, our constituency, to take an active role in supporting the civil society in mobilizing this global climate strike, which will not be limited to youth only, but in every workplace, in every jurisdiction, we're expecting millions of people to rise up. The 2 weeks of the UN climate conferences in Bonn under the name of SB50, the 50th session of the sub-Saharan bodies. Our engagement as LGMA was on mainly 7 work streams. First, we delivered our opening and closing remarks. That was an opportunity to share our updates and commend our achievements. And express our support to the positive progress to the extent possible. There were a number of mandated events, and the one that we were actively engaged was the Action for Climate Empowerment. The Marrakesh Partnership in the first week consulted with stakeholders. We were really lucky to have 2 of the champions to be present in the same week in the Bonn, and they had numerous consultations, and they have produced the 2019-2020 work program of the Marrakesh Partnership, which is the last cycle, and we hope an extension would be designed soon, so that this profile of action agenda continues to leverage its effectiveness in the UN process. This year there was an important element of the research dialogue, because officially now the outcome of the global research and action agenda on cities, which is an outcome of the Cities IPCC conference held in Edmonton, which is also adopted with the conclusions of the IPCC plenary, is now officially inserted into the agenda of the UNFCCC SABSTA, scientific and technological body. Of course, this will now give us all the opportunities to move forward on the research agenda for cities. Meanwhile, while this poster was prepared, UN Habitat also released the proceedings of the research agenda as well, which is also a good opportunity to capture what we have achieved in Edmonton. In addition to the global cities IPCC community, ICLEI also shared its support in a poster session to support its members in terms of climate action planning and implementation. There were several side events, not too many. One was led by ICLEI and NDC partnership on advancing multi-level and collaborative action. The second one from the LGMA community was SLOCAT and UITP, focusing on transport achievements or transport process. There were 2 other side events organized by research institutions, and we as ICLEI participated as speaker. In terms of press conferences, we had the Climate Change Association announcing their latest event in October in Ghana, the Climate Change Summit. For the Climate Action Studio, the LGMA community interviews were conducted by mayors of Izmir, Katbalogan, and Recife. The interviews are gradually uploaded on the web, and the one from Mayor of Izmir is already online available. Obviously, the peak of our engagement at the SB50 was the special joint event of ICLEI and COP24 presidency on multi-level climate action, focusing on e-mobility and adaptation. This was a unique model of engagement. First of all, as far as I can remember, it's the first time that the presidency is following up with their initiatives or announcements that was done in their home cities. So the 3 priorities, the 3 declarations, presidency had organized 3 specific events. The one on e-mobility, it was obviously focusing also the cities. And this was also the time when we were discussing with the UN Climate Change Secretariat a special event on multi-level action. So thanks to the very constructive spirit and positive process from both sides, we managed to merge our two events, and this was turned out into one single event, and is branded under the name of the Spatial Joint Event, Multi-Level Climate Action. And we have aligned ourselves behind the motto of the COP24 presidency, which is driving change together. Obviously, it was focusing on mobility, but considering the multi-level action, we also believe this is a nice motto. So we were very happy. This was designed in collaboration with Climate Secretariat and supporting partners, PSPA and AVERE. Other uniqueness of this, as we mentioned before, there were two other events as well, but the one that was held with the LGMA is the only one that is together with the constituency. So that, I think, is proving our engagement and recognition of our work within the presidency and secretariat. Again, the other benefit of this event is that for the first time in the UNFCCC calendar, an event branded under multi-level action was visible. So this is proving that our achievements with recognition of local and regional governments and the Paris Agreement is now on the way towards implementation, and all the outcomes from ICA and hopefully Climate Action Summit will support what we have been building here in Bonn. So all these parallel processes will be complementing each other. We had over 50 subnational representatives, including mayors and city or region leaders. Throughout the event, we also have appreciated the wonderful support from the Secretariat. We have worked with numerous teams, obviously the Executive Office, but as well as the Conference Affairs Service in terms of our accreditation, with the Observer Liaison Office, with the management of the whole agenda together with and the connection to the presidency, the Nairobi Work Program, on Marrakesh Partnership, and the communications team, all really helped us a lot, and I think that's another signal of our value of collaboration. In addition to our subnational constituency, we're also very happy to see the engagement of the parties, including EU presidency represented by Romanian government, Mexico. We received also delegations from Senegal, Germany, and Moroccan delegation also expressed support and interest. But not only parties, we also have experienced active engagement of stakeholders, different constituencies like German Watch, transport community, Slocat, and Koika, the indigenous people community. This again shows the value of leadership of the local and regional governments and respect that they have received from all the partners. Here is a capture of some of the moments. One of the good things is that we have split the event into two. The first one at the high level opening was held at the Chamber Hall, which is one of the most prestigious venue of the UNFCCC, and also giving the atmosphere, because this is the former parliament building of the German government. So our constituency is familiar with this type of assembly or town halls. So we thought this was really the best place to start with. And we had a very good participation from the presidents and the parties. We then split into breakout groups. Those photos are from the adaptation working group, but in the parallel room, we also had e-mobility colleagues focusing on their own priorities as well. So the day also concluded on the 26th of June at the City Hall, the official kickoff of the UNFCCC Friends of Multi-Level Action. As those who can follow us, this builds on our achievements in the 2013 towards Paris Agreement. We have benefits from the Bonn Fiji commitment to revamp this process, and in 2018 the Cities Energy Talano Dialogues was an opportunity for us to prove the value of engagement at various levels, and the UNFCCC Friends of Multi-Level Action was also one of the initiatives presented at ICA. So we can find the new contact email address, actually the same group, but the branding is a bit revised, and we will be continuing towards COP, and our goal is to make sure that at least every year in the June sessions there is a very interactive multi-level dialogue, so that by the time between the SPC sessions and the COPs, national governments and our stakeholders can benefit from the outcomes and bring more robust outcomes to the NFCC. Over these days, we have also run parallel Residency Congress 10th anniversary. We have captured a nice video that captures all the 10 years achievements. The last closing plenary was interesting because that was the moment when the mayor of Bonn have invited the Fridays for Future to the plenary, and they declared their statements. And tomorrow, the City Council of Bonn municipality will discuss their proposal to announce a climate emergency in the Bonn City Council. We are hopeful this would fly out because there is a very good consensus from all the parties and demonstrate the leadership of the local government as well, and including the city of Bonn. Next year, we will be advancing our new program of the Residencies Congress, which expands a bit more towards all areas of sustainability under the motto of Urban Era for Life. G20 had important events this year. In month of June, there was Heads of State summit, and before that, the Urban 20 communique was presented by Governor of Tokyo to Prime Minister of Japan. And a week before, the Minister of Environment and Energy met for the first time in the Nagano Prefecture, and the Nagano Declaration was presented by the Governor of Nagano to Japanese Minister of Environment. If you can have linked to these outcomes, you can see a number of declarations or statements that reflects inputs from these inputs and communiques. Therefore, we are grateful for the leadership of Japanese government, Japanese stakeholders, Urban 20 and Nagano Prefecture, as well as the Japanese government and enabling these opportunities. In the US, just immediately when we finished the climate conference in Bonn, and while Abu Dhabi was taking place, there was the Climate Mayor Summit in Honolulu. Traditionally, a day before the US Conference of Mayors, this is the summit hosted by the host city, this time Honolulu, and it drew pretty good participation. It doubled in terms of numbers compared to last year. A new initiative on electric vehicles, new buses was announced, and there were deliberations on finance, insurance, and philanthropies. And the resolutions from the Conference of Mayors also referred to their commitments in implementation of Global Compact on Migration, Climate Agenda, and Energy Agenda, which demonstrate the U.S. Stakeholders are, especially the local leaders, are continuing their leadership in global efforts. With this, I'd like to give a break to my part of the presentation, and we're excited to hear from Hamza the latest outcomes or the latest updates from the preparation of the Climate Action Summit. Hamza, once again, we appreciate your engagement with us and look forward to your intervention.
Thank you, Yunus. Thank you for inviting us, Sophie and myself, and we're very happy to be here. Even though we, as you said, we just landed yesterday, but it's important for us to keep the dialogue with all the cities and local government constituencies, because as you can see from the chart that we are looking at right now, infrastructure, cities, and local action are definitely one of the priorities of the summit of the Secretary General. Are a work stream in and of itself, so that already gives you a sense of how important it is for this summit. Just wanted to mention there that the name of Russia is mentioned on this slide. That is not correct. Russia is not part of this coalition. But I think that this is a minor mistake. I don't, Yunus, do you want me to present the whole coalition and the work stream, or should we directly talk about what happened specifically in Abu Dhabi?
Hamza, first of all, thanks for to alert. We're happy to update the latest version. This was as a presentation we received in a previous version. I think you can start to focus on the ICLEI, because we have talked about this in our previous webinar. This is a monthly webinar we're running, so our colleagues are more or less aware. But I think you may dig into maybe the key building blocks of the track, and if there's anything you wish to add on from your side. So our colleagues are relatively familiar in broad sense.
All right. So indeed, in terms of the work that is being produced under this coalition, the stage where we are today is the result of several iterations and several conversations we've had with all the stakeholders who've been involved, including the cities and local governments networks, think tanks, academia, and member states as well. And so the current state of affairs is that we have three verticals or three sectoral focuses, which are the ones that the three pillars that you see on this slide, and we have something on the built environment, something on transportation, and something on resilience, with a specific focus on the most vulnerable urban dwellers. And then we have what we call the enablers, which are the decentralized and localized finance, and subnational mobilization in general, meaning all the commitments and the mobilization of the cities and local governments. And all of this is based on a coherent narrative that we feel is fairly well captured by the Coalition on Urban Transition report that will be published ahead of the summit. And the overall objective is to come to the summit with broad and coherent message to national governments. And the hope there is that we can leverage the summit to secure commitments from the national level to allow more ambition and better implementation of the climate action plans of cities and local governments. Because what we've been hearing over the past months from our partners is that the leadership, the willingness to act, the appetite to do more is definitely here at the city level and the local government level. But what is lacking is often the means of implementation, if you'd like. So the finance, the regulatory and legislative autonomy, or the right the right tools in terms of policy to drive this ambition forward. So given that the United Nations is predominantly a member state driven organization, we feel that we can maybe leverage the summit to secure a commitment at the national level. But of course, this does not mean that we're not expecting additional announcements and commitments from the subnational level and local governments, asking them to show this continued leadership and their continued mobilization for ambitious climate action. So in a nutshell, that's what it is. If you want, we can deep dive a little bit on these three verticals in terms of what we have in terms of initiatives. So at this point, we have something on net zero carbon buildings for all, which is a proposal that is driven by the WRI and the government of Turkey. And the purpose there is to have zero carbon buildings. All new buildings being built by 2030 should be net zero carbon, and the stock of existing buildings should be retrofitted by 2050 to become a net zero. The other component of this initiative is, of course, the mobilization of finance towards this goal, and the objective is to mobilize over $1 trillion by 2030, noting that this would not be new money, but existing funds that would be allocated to this specific objective. And this would represent only a fraction of the expected investments in the built environment by 2030 coming from DFIs. In terms of mobility, decarbonized mobility, we have a joint initiative by the federal government of Germany and SLOCAT and TDA looking at heavy duty vehicles. And the purpose there is to drive policy change by showing that there is a strong demand for heavy duty vehicles that are net zero, that are decarbonized, and showing to the manufacturers that giving them confidence that they can go ahead and improve the supply of such vehicles because the demand is there. I'd just like to note that on the transport front, things are still evolving, and this is probably not likely to be the final product of this subtrack. On the resilience for the urban poor, it's an initiative driven by UN Habitat, looking at protecting better over 600 million people over the world, especially in developing countries, by better integrating specific concerns around slum dwellers and informal settlements into policy planning at the municipal level. The German government has also been leading on the decentralized finance track, and there we have an ambitious proposal called the LUCI, which stands for Leadership for Urban Climate Investments, and it is an initiative that looks at the project cycle from beginning to end, even before beginning, from project preparation to even tagging the financial flows. And then on subnational mobilization, of course, we have the different cities networks and local government networks with whom we're working, and we will be able to announce more on that subtrack at a later stage. But there again, we're very happy with the cooperation that we're having with the different partners, and especially we're very excited by the launch of the Coalition on Urban Transition report that will be launched maybe a week or two before the climate summit. So just wanted to highlight here that we've been very active and present in different events related to cities and local governments. We've been to Heidelberg for ICA. We, with the UN Habitat, we organized a ministerial level meeting during their assembly in Nairobi. The Secretary General was at was in Vienna for the R20 summit. We've been talking to several governors and provincial governments, etc. So we're very happy that we're being able to really put the issue of subnational climate action at the center of this summit. It's definitely one of the tracks that has the most traction and gathered a lot of interest from member states and from different partners. I think I can say that this is a fairly well-structured track with very robust initiatives, but that need to be, these different threads need to be weaved in together in a more coherent message by the time of the summit. So, but other than that, I think that again, this track is very robust, and at the summit. Provided, of course, that we manage to do the necessary outreach and have the mobilization of all the partners in favor of the initiatives that we're working on. So my message to you today would be to invite you to look more closely at the proposals that are on the table and see within your networks and constituency whether there is appetite from your members to support one or several of these initiatives, because that would give them even more impact and would pressure even more on national governments to step up and provide the required support. I also wanted to mention that during Abu Dhabi, we organized a synergy session specifically focused on infrastructure and cities and local and transport. There was a great interest from all the participants in Abu Dhabi, which I believe were around 1,000 or so. During the synergy session, we talked about other initiatives that could also contribute to, building decarbonized and resilient cities and regions by adding initiatives linked to energy efficiency, air pollution, nature-based solutions to make cities and infrastructures more resilient. So a lot of interest once again, and I'm looking at my colleague Sophie. If
Well, I think overview. From
Hamza,
those,
we're having difficulty to hear Sophie.
oh, can you hear me better now?
Much better. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, sorry. So I was saying, I think Hamza gave a very good overall picture of this, and again to underline the importance of the topic as it is one of the 9 coalition, but also one of the bundle that was discussed in Abu Dhabi, and see that we have a lot of interest and a lot of stakeholders who are coming to us right now. And I think the coming weeks that will lead up to the summit in September are going to be very helpful to do some political outreach and to help us strengthen those initiatives that we today have on the table. So those 3 verticals on building, transport, and adaptation, and then those enablers on finance and some national mobilization. So I think for us, that's the priority today, to really kind of make sure that we have the outreach and also the support necessary to grow those initiatives and make sure they are as strong as possible for the September summit. So happy to take any question if you have, or if you need any information on a specific of the specific thing that was just presented. Very happy to answer those.
Thanks, Sophie and Hamza, for this really comprehensive coverage, and it's also good to hear your perspectives as well, because you are being in the kitchen. And in the morning, Carlos, our colleague Carlos from FMD, was also signaling similar feedbacks, saying that there is a growing interest, and I think we have really this proves that this glass ceiling is now over. This working of national governments in a collaborative way with all levels of government is now really becoming to a practice. I will continue, if you like, in the next slides about our agenda, but there are some overlaps. For example, the regional climate weeks and as well as the HLPF. Maybe we can, in the Q&A session, we can come back to that because I think there will be still rooms, as you mentioned, some of those are still being worked out. So the work is not completed. In fact, we are coming to a next level. So feel free to intervene at that moment as well. Or if there are questions from colleagues. But at the moment, I just saw an question from the chat box from Emmanuel from C40. I think it may be better we can have a direct Q&A at this moment. Maybe there is, instead of waiting for the rest of the slides, if it is okay for you, I'll give the floor to Emmanuel from C40.
Thank you, Yunus, and good afternoon, everyone. Yes, just very 2 quick comments. First, thank you, Hamza and Sophie, for this great presentation. I have to say I've been in many calls around the UNSG Summit and the ICLEI tracks lately, and I had never seen this track presented that clearly and with such a level of detail at the same time on the initiative. I think this is exactly what we wanted. And only for that, probably the Abu Dhabi meeting was useful to clarify where we are and what are the expected outcomes. And thank you for that. And I think we will definitely follow up by email with you to have even more details on all of this to see how we can contribute. I just also wanted to make a quick comment on the G20 outcomes, as it is part of your presentation, Yunus. One thing that is very interesting to observe is that the leaders communique that was released on Saturday last week, you may have followed perhaps the debates around this communique and the threat to have it totally deprived of reference to climate change and Paris Agreement, and the resistance by some European countries, France in particular. But at the end, so the G20 leaders communique does have a paragraph on climate, which is quite weak if we compare to what we had before. The reference to 1.5 has disappeared. They don't talk about renewable energy anymore. But there are 2 very important outcomes that I would like to underline here. I think this is the first time non-state actors are mentioned into a G20 leaders communique, and they are included into the climate change part of it. So here, I think we can glorify perhaps ourselves and see this as a possible result of our work with Urban 20 and other declarations we've made with non-state actors, cities, business, etc. So I think this is a very positive development. And also, I think for the first time, smart cities and cities in general are mentioned, are singled out into this communique. And again, probably a result of our work around Urban 20 and other partnerships who have promoted the case of cities in the G20 lately.
Thank you, Emmanuel, for giving some background, and it's good to hear really the outcome. I think this year we also really enjoyed the Japanese leadership, because since the beginning they were also in the UNFCCC and other fora, collectively all actors in the Japanese government and stakeholders were they demonstrated a very true leadership. So it's good, just to let you know, probably you heard Emmanuel, but in the morning presentation or webinar, there was a question about the Urban 20 next year. I'm not sure whether you'd like to address anything on that. That can come again, but just wanted to flag this to you. If you want to comment, you can comment as well later on, before the end of this webinar as well. So let's go to the last couple of slides in terms of our agenda. Yes, we mentioned about regional climate weeks. As you know, this is becoming also a very attractive agenda. This enables to discuss or translate the UNFCCC outcomes in the regionals, in the hometowns of if you like, and for those who cannot travel to COPs, they can easily be engaged, and therefore I think there is a great opportunity, and UNFCCC is developing this with a number of partners, and this year particularly, it is designed in the similar structure of the UN Climate Action Summit. That also gives us the synergy between each process. And I think that is what's expected, that in Salvador on end of August and in Bangkok in the beginning of September will be the last opportunities for consultations of the summit, as well as the preparations. There are several deadlines just to keep us informed, in particular organizing side events, action hub, exhibition booths, and the knowledge center. Each of them has specific forms, so each partner who is interested should fill this appropriately. And obviously there is a 2 weeks delay, or let's say these events are 2 weeks back to back. Therefore, some of the deadlines are a bit different. For the case of Bangkok, there is also an additional call for expression of interest for coordination and supporting special tracks. This was already done for Salvador, so for each of the track, the partners are now announced, and official announcement will come soon. But in the case of Salvador, the way these regional events hosted are also slightly unique. For example, in the case of Ghana, it was African and Ghanaian partners. In the case of Salvador, I think Salvador as a city is very, very eager, but Brazil is one of the governments who are also participating in the ICLEI coalition. So there will be, I think there will be interesting results. Salvador will make a special presentation as a city, and you can see the basic agenda so far, but keep informed that there will be more updates coming soon. Similarly, the case of Bangkok, it's not necessarily the city of Bangkok, but it is mainly the UN headquarters, and UNESCO is based in Bangkok. Therefore, we believe the engagement of Bangkok may not be as high as the way in Salvador's case, but still is an opportunity for interaction with the Asian stakeholders, Asia Pacific stakeholders as well. In July, meanwhile, there will be the high-level political forum, which is the regular ministerial consultations. This year it will focus on climate, and one of those SDGs that will be monitored, a climate session negotiation, or let's say climate debates, will be held on 13th of July. Local and regional governments will have their own day on the 15th of July, which will be a combination of events at the One Millennium Plaza and the UN headquarters. And this year's specific uniqueness is that every 4 year heads of state gather, and this year will be one of those 4 years. In fact, this is the first time heads of state will be convening after the adoption of Paris Agreement, after the adoption of SDGs, and after the adoption of the new urban agenda. So it is expected that this will give a new boost or new momentum. Definitely, hopefully not a backsliding, so that every new government takes the agendas further. We will see. We will see how we will be involved. But the reason I'm mentioning is that, especially the one in New York in July, could also be an opportunity, because as you heard, Hamza, Sophie, many of the colleagues are in New York. Probably during the local and regional governments day, before and after, there may be additional opportunities for both ICLEI track, but also with other tracks. Therefore, we will alert you to stay in touch or keep an eye on it, the upcoming announcements, so that those delegations who are present may find an opportunity to interact. Manuel is asking any details on the SDG Summit. At the moment, I personally don't have any agenda or an update yet. Probably during the HLPF, we can expect more updates. It's also good to recall once again for the SDGs HLPF. It is mainly coordinated by our partner sister organization UCLG on behalf of the Global Task Force as the Secretariat. And in the case of the Climate Action Summit, we're following the facilitation of the Global Covenant of Mayors. So as you have seen, this complex agendas demand huge resources and time and staff. And I think this is the strength of the urban community or local and regional government networks, that each of us are representing, each of us on behalf of others. What we are achieving in Bonn is conveyed to Abu Dhabi, goes to New York, and then comes back to again to COP. So that, I think, the diversity is our richness, and this way we can keep up, and our internal coordination and share of information is also making sure that we convey the right messages. I mean, I don't know how many constituencies are having a debrief of Abu Dhabi immediately after it is concluded. I think this is again one example that the strength of and robustness of our network in that sense. So this is really good to hear that we can connect all these agendas, even physically not present, but sharing and conveying the same messages and disseminating vice versa. The last two slides is about the COP25 agenda. This is a previous slide that we have used before. This is mainly the priorities of the COP25 presidency. As we said, in Bonn, Champion was there for 1 week, and in the second week, President-designate was there, and both had very intensive consultations. It seems those agendas are bringing new, fresh ideas and fresh elements, and this is the time for action. Therefore, many of those areas, there is multiple action agendas, especially also at the local and regional level. Therefore, we also would like to now start to clarify how we will be engaged day to day in Chile, in Santiago. This is the first sketch, if you can say, that is based on what we have heard over the past 2 weeks. Most important thing is that this time high-level segment will be split into two. It seems there will be heads of state at the beginning, like Katowice did. On the morning of Monday, there will be heads of state, several. But immediately afterwards, we heard there will be ministers of transport upon the invitation of Chilean Minister of Transport. You may remember Chile is one of those champions on progressive mobility solutions. So this is, if it occurs like that, this is the first time the ministers of transport will be engaged in a climate COP. But the challenge is that by that time there will be no environment or climate ministers. So and they will come mainly towards the beginning of the second week. So we are trying to be clarifying ourselves about what to do in both of these slots, and in between there is this Marrakesh partnership events. One idea that we are discussing, and we're also starting to connect to the government of the region of Santiago de Chile. So instead of a standalone leaders summit, we can consider thematic summits where local and regional governments are very actively involved. For example, around the ministers of transport, we may consider an urban mobility summit. And then when ministers of environment or climate comes, we can touch on the other topics like circular economy, or more specifically on NDCs as a follow-up of Talanoa and all the year-round engagement. When you say a circular economy, you can also include the biodiversity, ecosystem, energy. So many topics can be involved. The only one that is different is the ministers of transport. So with this logic, we can consider 2 rounds of mobilization with a very targeted approach, that those who attend the first week, the urban mobility event, do not necessarily have to stay for the second week. And those who come to the second week are also aware that the discussion will not be mobility, but more on the other elements of climate agenda. If we can manage it, I think this would be a good demonstration that we are following the agendas appropriately. This would have a consequence on financial issues, because obviously transport costs are the highest. So we should be realistic. And therefore, I believe the upcoming consultations in July, especially also towards Salvador and also the pre-COP, can all help us to shape it better. With this, I think we're getting close to our round of webinar this month. I guess we still have a couple of minutes if there are any questions or remarks or clarifications. Both from Hamza and Sophie, feel free to contribute any missing or anything additional that sparked after your presentation, or other colleagues who were in the session, please feel free to join.
Yunus, if you allow me, yes, I'd like to say a little.
Please.
Something. Yes. First of all, I just wanted to emphasize, stress the fact that we are working very closely with the UNFCCC, whether via Patricia Espinosa herself, who's sitting at the steering committee and has different hats within the organization of the Climate Summit. So just to give you a reassurance that the work that we're doing for the Climate Summit and the formal process of the UNFCCC are closely related and complementary, and this is a priority for us. Also, just to stress the fact that we have clear guidelines from the Secretary General that all the commitments that will be announced at the summit need to be followed up on by the different UN bodies. So one such opportunity to do a follow-up would already be the COP in Santiago. So we certainly hope that the work we're doing on transport can be linked to the potential summit on urban mobility. But again, we have to make sure that all of these announcements and efforts, etc., one, have a clear visibility at the summit, and two, are brought together in a coherent manner so that that the message is clear and loud and audible. Other thing I wanted to say is that inspired by the Talanoa dialogue, of course, as you can see, the collaborative and participatory nature of the preparations for the summit is there. We're trying to be as inclusive as possible, which comes at the cost of maybe less clarity on the process, or a more organic process, I should say. And I certainly hope that we can meet with several of your members during the HLPF. We will, of course, be here. The urban agenda of the UN is becoming broader. It's becoming mainstreamed in many agencies and bodies, like the Sustainable Development Unit at the DSG's office, Habitat, UNDP, all of them are now looking very closely at the urban agenda, and especially in relation to climate action. So I think that what you're seeing when you say that the agenda, the program for the coming months is very rich and very demanding in terms of barely being able to follow all of what is happening. This is a sign that the urban agenda is becoming mainstreamed into everything that we do, and the sign that it's gaining in momentum and importance within this house. So again, thank you for the opportunity to engage today.
Thanks, Hamza. Additional remarks. Just to complement, we have also seen this, for example, when we are in the UN Habitat Assembly. You mentioned there was a ministerial dialogues, and one of the prime minister who attended the summit was the COP23 president, Frank Bainimarama, and he was the champion of opening the Talanoa space, and we came to the Talanoas when we kicked off at the World Urban Forum, and now he came to UN Habitat Assembly, conveyed the same messages. Our mayor, who was following the climate negotiations on behalf of LGMA, is now leading UN Habitat Executive Director. And the president of the UN Habitat Assembly is the former Mexico City Environment Secretary, who has been championing this with her effort in 2010 back to immediately after Copenhagen through Mexico City Pact. So this gives that all stars are really aligning themselves, and we are hopeful that this will give the courage and the positive spirit that the next decade we will be running faster, and we will be running much robust, and make sure our citizens and societies are confident that we are winning this battle. One final point which came up in the session in the morning was, as you mentioned, the follow-up, the NASCA platform of the UN Climate Change Secretary that you mentioned about the close collaboration. We are aware that there is this keen interest to upgrade, to improve this online reporting process, and in collaboration with the data providers, which we also contribute. We are hearing that this will also be a mirror of the initiatives, how do they feed into, or how do they relate to the NDCs, how these two processes can see each other. This gives the chance that from COP25 to COP26, the time will be really helpful for us, that now all these came into the national processes, so that we see much more active and engagement and implementation of the NDCs as well. So that could be one final remark from our side as well. Good. Any other points, comments, colleagues? I think we have reached to a good level of now maturity of our discussion, and the time span is also now about to close. As you all know, these records, the sessions are recorded, and it will be uploaded on the web, and we will also share the slides as well. And we will be watching for additional outcomes. We are aware the Global Compact colleagues, the Secretariat is preparing an outcome of the Abu Dhabi. So we will be circulating this soon, or they will circulate soon, and we will follow up. Our next webinar is towards the end of August, considering the time of relatively summer break in the Northern Hemisphere. But we will continue to use our email channels, and I think there will be further updates. And you all heard from Hamza, there will be opportunities to interact in July in New York. So we will watch out, and we look forward to sharing these outcomes. So thanks a lot, and take care. Goodbye. Bye-bye.